Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So Tarek, continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and I've got a surprise Tuesday video for you because I did have this video planned, and some of what you're going to see in here is still consistent, but Robert on Labor Day updated the core, and I decided I would come back in and talk about the new updates, because some very big games that didn't used to work have now started working, so I figured even though I said I was going to take Labor Day off, I figured I could take a half hour and talk about what's going on. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But right now you're looking at the Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask running on the current core, and this started running as of about 4 hours ago, which is why I'm cutting into this video to kind of make it a mashup. And you will see that there's definitely some graphics missing, but this is Majora's Mask, it is recognizable, and Robert was teasing us with screenshots of this being in-game all morning long. I was at the beach hanging out with my wife, they started coming in, and thank you to Andy D, he helped me with some captures to get this out to you guys. It is absolutely wild to think that we are even looking at this on screen. A mere 3 weeks ago, we were just playing Mario Kart and you were racing around the track as a black square box. Now you're looking at Majora's Mask like 75% running on the current MiSTer core, and it is running at a very good speed. You can see that moon, it is definitely horror fuel, and it is working for you here today. And this isn't the only Zelda game I'm going to be showing you on this video. I've got a lot of big hits to go through, so definitely don't miss any of them. But you can see running around here, playing the Ocarina, everything does work. And if you haven't noticed already, the entire inventory is filled with Ocarinas, not just because of the current core status and some saving issues, but as far as the graphics are concerned, if this wasn't running on real hardware right now, I would have a lot of trouble telling, other than those little lines in those light rays right there. I don't believe those are on original hardware, but this just looks like Link in Majora's Mask, and it's so much fun to watch this. I'm sure people are going to start playing this, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out in like 12 to 18 hours that you can just beat this game. I haven't heard of anybody freezing it yet, but it's very possible you can. But even running around as Deku Scrub Link here, the speed is good, the look is good. This is just Majora's Mask, but it's running on this current core, and Robert was definitely motivated to get this going, and that's the fun part. He does give us previews on Discord of what he's working on next, and he kind of teases us just a little bit, showing us what's going to be coming down the pipe. So it was a lot of fun to kind of just redo the intro to this video to show you guys this, because this is obviously one of the biggest games on the system. Now running around, you're going to remember that there's definitely ground in this area in the village. It is not here yet, and that's just going to come down to a certain rendering mode that isn't incorporated in RDP. But this does look like Majora's Mask, and this right here looks like Ocarina of Time. Now I am testing this on a ROM hack that allows you to select any single level in the game. And I will tell you right now, compared to Majora's Mask, you are definitely going to see some freezing issues on this. It's not a judgment whatsoever. It's spectacular to see this running in real time. It is just not as stable as Majora's Mask, which is interesting because this was the first of the two games, but apparently Majora's Mask uses more implementations that Robert's already gotten into the FPGA code. But just seeing this running on screen, two of the best 3D Zelda games ever made before something like Breath of the Wild came out, in my opinion, it's just so much fun. And moving over to a capture from a MiSTer Discord member after we got the graphic fixes in for those white lines, you see there, it is just spectacular. Now moving into inside Jabu Jabu's belly right here, again it looks good, but as you move around you're going to see what happens. Pretty much if you do anything in the levels, you're going to cause this game to hard hang. If I just stand here, everything's going to be totally fine, but the minute I start moving around, that's when issues can present themselves. I'm just going to come over here into the corner and I'm going to cut that grass there, and you're going to see a couple Deku nuts pop up. That is a hard freeze. Or down here underground, everything's fine, but as soon as I walk up to this door and actually try to open it, you're going to see what happens again. Another hard freeze. Of course, these things are going to be improved in the future. This is all part and parcel of this development core. Getting into the ice cavern here is that one boulder goes by, no big deal whatsoever, but as the next one comes by, you're going to see it freezes again. Now interestingly, in the level select, there is just basically a debug room where you can get a chest, and I thought touching the chest was going to cause this level to freeze. But interestingly, as you see I get up to it, that's not going to happen whatsoever. We're going to be able to walk up to the chest, we're going to open it up, and you're going to see the standard animation from this game, and we're going to end up with a blue rupee. This didn't freeze, I was able to get through, but interestingly, as I went back to the teleporter to get out of the underground area, That also worked, but then I got a hard freeze on this overlay. Looks like the map but drawn from above. And of course it wouldn't be Ocarina of Time if I didn't show you Hyrule Field. I will tell you it looks great, but the minute you try to do anything in it, it's going to be another hard hang as well. But both Zelda games are working on the current core. They look spectacular. Sometimes they freeze, but the progress is absolutely incredible. But there's so many awesome games you can play on the new core. Something like Mario Party here, a game so fun that it literally ripped up the palm of your hand, and Nintendo offered gloves. If you didn't grow up with a Nintendo 64, there was a news report that kids are ruining the palms of their hands spinning the analog stick, and parents were in an uproar. We've gotten a lot smarter from there, and I never remember that actually happening to me, but if you do remember that, leave me a comment down below because I would be very curious. But again, this was a game before the current core that released like 4 hours ago, just didn't work. Now it is working here. You can get through a match, you can go around the arena, you can play the mini games, everything is just 100% working the way it should be, and it does sound really good as well. And I'm going to give you a sound sample in just a moment, but I love this as you basically chisel around that bomb area. They just blow right through the sky. So many awesome mini games, but again, this has got a great music sample. Go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds, and I'll come back with more games to show you. Now moving over to Shadows of the Empire on the Nintendo 64, this is a game that is legendary for really pushing the hardware and doing things that other developers were not doing. And the good thing is, this game just seems 100% perfect. Andy D captured this one for me. He played it and he basically flew the ship into anything he could to try to end the level earlier. This is fast, this is fluid, all the controls are working, and I don't see absolutely anything in the graphics that don't look correct to me as far as what is being drawn on the screen. Something might be missing, but what is here looks exactly like it should if you were playing on real hardware. This is a classic game, so much fun, and it's definitely not a cheap cartridge to pick up either, which will be fun to have MiSTer to play those games maybe you missed. But everything just looks great, and that's what this new core is all about. Obviously on the weekend we got texture filtering, now we have improvements to the edges of polygons. There's a lot more to be added to the core, and of course we'll keep updating videos with your guys' viewer requests and anything that improves. So leave me a comment down below and tell me the next game you want to see me test on the channel. Might be later in the video, but if it's not, leave me that comment. But again, just flying around here, it is so impressive to see this drawing on the screen, because like 3 weeks ago we were basically looking at black boxes and this game would not boot whatsoever. It's one of those games that gets tested every single time a new video core comes out, and it's one of those things that never worked until today. So it's just so much fun to see the evolution, not just in the graphics but in the games we can play, because it seems like now maybe 70% of the library on the Nintendo 64 will boot and at least show something. It's limited, I feel like, to 30% or so of games that do nothing when you actually load them up. And I do love this here. Andy D just crashes directly into the side of the AT-AT, and that is it. Or maybe AT-AT. Not a Star Wars fan, I think I'm pronouncing it right, but leave me a comment down below. And trust me, I'm not trashing Star Wars. I love that you love it. It's just never been for me, but people always try to convince me to give it another shot. Maybe one day I will. But something I've always loved is Animal Crossing, and right here on the Nintendo 64, it's a game that we never got in North America, but this is a translation. We got the Animal Crossing start on GameCube, but in Japan they got it over there on the Nintendo 64. And I love this game. It literally got my wife and I through basically the first year of the pandemic. We probably put 500 hours into the game. She was playing and I was just watching, and it works here on the current core, and it's so much fun to see where Animal Crossing really got its start. This franchise has been with us an absolute ton of time, and it has been fun from the start. Obviously Tom Nook is here, the landlord that's going to basically take you for every single bell you have. He's getting rich, you're getting poor, but the ecosystem does seem to work. All capitalist Tom Nook jokes aside, this also has a great soundtrack as well, so go ahead and listen just for like 30 seconds and I'll come back because I've got like a dozen more games to show you which are just awesome. Yeah, it just basically sounds like Animal Crossing. The sound is good there, and again, I just love this game, and I think it looks really good on the Nintendo 64. The 3D graphics, the 2D sprites, the way that the Nintendo 64 filters these images, I think this is when the Nintendo 64 really shines, the combination of 3D and 2D. There's the Lloyd right there, probably looking for some bells to do something for you as well. Everything in this game basically wants to take your money. That's what you learn from Animal Crossing. Life is expensive, and there always is a bill to pay. All jokes aside again, though, I just love seeing this run. It's so much fun, and I can't wait to get into another playthrough of this. It's been a long time since I played Animal Crossing on the Nintendo 64, and I definitely want to come back around to it. It's one of those games, it's just such a classic franchise. You either love it or you hate it, and tell me down below, are you an Animal Crossing fan, or do you not really love it too much? Now I promised you another look at Banjo-Kazooie, and here it is, and it's so much improved. Last time we took a look at this, and that's only been like 48 hours ago, there were white lines at the edges of each polygon, like the texture didn't make its way all the way to the end. Robert said it was driving him nuts, so he has fixed it within that set time period. And honestly, it looks spectacular, and I feel like the audio might sound a little bit better as well. So go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds, tell me what you think, but don't go anywhere because I got a lot more Nintendo 64 games to show you. But enjoy! Sounds good to me, but tell me what you think down below. But here's the situation with Banjo-Kazooie. At least on the previous core where it had the white lines, you could sit down and you could beat this game. Somebody did it from start to finish, took them about 5 hours, and they put that up on the Discords. So while no one has beaten it with the current core, my anticipation is if you want to just play Banjo-Kazooie, you can on this current core, and you can see the ending of it. It's insane to me to think that at this current stage, where like a month ago games barely did anything, a game as popular as Banjo-Kazooie could be beaten on the current MiSTer core. The evolution of this is just so fast, and the idea that we can beat games that we know and love, I absolutely love it. 10 out of 10 in my book. Now another game I talked about like a week and a half ago that's got some vast improvements as well is Dr. Mario. It used to be that the only graphics you would see in the game were his medicine going down the screen, but nothing else would appear whatsoever. Now on the last couple cores it has been markedly improved, and you're going to see right here it is just working. Now forgive me, I'm not very good at Dr. Mario or Tetris. It's never really been a genre that I love, but I understand a lot of other people really do, and Dr. Mario was definitely a popular game on a lot of different Nintendo systems. This is a game that went from basically playing blind to being 100% playable. I see no graphical issues, I see no issues with the audio, it's just working. The control is smooth, I had no problems with it whatsoever. So it's another game that's 100% been promoted to the working list, and it's so much fun to see that actually happen. It's one of those things. Once the evolution comes in, it gets so exciting, we all get hyped up, we come back in a new core and we test new games and we find out what works and what doesn't. Dr. Mario 100% works. My ability to play Dr. Mario 100% doesn't work because I got a game over on the first level. Now a game that's been a big viewer request and I can say now does work at least for a little bit is going to be Pokemon Stadium 2. I tried the original Pokemon Stadium and absolutely nothing happened whatsoever, but on the sequel you can see the introductory cutscenes right here until they end up freezing. This is a game that if you want to see more into it, you have to beat start like it owes you money, but if you just want to watch the cutscene, you can see it until it freezes and just reset the core in menu. You'll be right back into the game. But we can get into the main menu. We have full control of everything. All of the assets are working. They look correct. They sound correct. All of the menuing is there, and you'll see as I get a little further in what actually happens. But you can select different modes. I tried a few different ones, and basically the same thing happened no matter what I tried. Let's go over to battle now and just try to get a battle going. You'll see that we get to the Pokemon selection screen. You can have all your different character choices. All the things you want to do before you actually get into the game and start playing are 100% here. Unfortunately, the minute we actually try to load into the battle, the game is going to hard freeze. So you can see the menu. You guys asked to see it. Now you know what it does. Moving over to another game that's seen vast improvements since the previous core is Space Station Silicon Valley, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see the comments saying the people that love this game, this was one of my favorites back in the day, but I feel like it doesn't get as much credit today as it used to back in the 90s. This is another game that you had all of those white lines on the polygons and it just didn't look correct. Now it looks exactly like it should. The texture filtering is here. You do get a little bit of that polygonal mesh on the waterfall, but if I didn't show you that, if I just froze the screen, you really wouldn't be able to tell whether or not this was original Nintendo 64 hardware or a work in progress MiSTer FPGA core, and that's how close this core is getting in some instances. It really becomes almost imperceivable whether or not you're playing on real hardware or whether you're playing on an FPGA implementation of the hardware. And now that we can save in game as well, you can get further into the game and test and see what works, what doesn't, and how far you can get. But this is another game as well that I think has had some audio improvements. It sounds clearer than the last time I talked about it 2 cores ago. Go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, but come back because I still have a ton of games to show you that just work. Yeah, it just sounds like Space Station Silicon Valley to me, and I love that because this game has such an understated but charming soundtrack, and I can't wait to replay this on MiSTer, because it's probably been like 10 years or so since I last took a look at it. I know I didn't finish my playthrough then. It may be the last time I actually played this game from start to finish is when it was new in the 90s, but that's the fun of MiSTer. It's not just that we're seeing hardware be recreated in FPGA, it's that we're going to be able to relive a lot of memories that we've forgotten about in the last couple decades. But speaking of games I play basically every year versus haven't played whatsoever, San Francisco Rush 2. And this game is just a 10 out of 10 banger in my opinion. I played this so much and I love it. Now look at the car here, see what it looks like, and it basically just looks like a car. If I go back to the previous capture, you're going to see those white lines on the polygons, the issues we were talking about earlier. Those have 100% been fixed in this current core. It looks like a car, there's no white lines anywhere. There is more background here as well. The corruption on some of the buildings is much less in this core. Honestly, the game moves so quickly I can't even really see if there's any issues where previously it was very obvious because those lines on the car were right in the middle of your screen. And this is just one of those games. I know what it feels like, I know what it plays like, and even with the lines on the last core, the physics, the handling, everything here, at least on my control setup, just felt incredible. The physics in this game are very unique. You either love them or hate them, but this has always been one of my favorite arcade racing games of all time. And when the core is improved and this game is 100% playable, it's probably going to be one of the first games I try to complete again. It's just one of those nostalgic memories for me, but leave me a comment down below and tell me what your most nostalgic Nintendo 64 game is, because sometimes it's not the best game or your favorite game, it's just the game that you absolutely love. And for me, getting Rush 2, collecting all the different items in the game, just 100% did it for me back in the day. Now, a game that I'm not as nostalgic for and has a lot of improvements is going to be Rayman 2, because last time I showed this to you, it had the same white line issues. Now, we've lost text completely, that is no longer working, but last time it were just white lines for text, so it's not like we could read anything anyway. But you'll see running around in the world with the texture filtering applied, the CPU cache on, and those white line fixes in. This just looks like the Rayman that you remember outside of those little bit of text issues. There's a little bit of black line around some of the sprites, but I would have to actually go back and check my original copy of Rayman 2, because I'm thinking it may have actually been there, but I can't remember. That black line there definitely was not though. But it is just so much fun to see these 3D platformers come to life, because there were so many platformers back in this era. Bomberman Hero being my favorite, but I know a lot of people had a lot of different favorites, so tell me that down below as well. I always love hearing you guys' opinions on the games. And I've got a 30-second sound sample because it is good, but come back because I still got like 6 games to show you. Again, another quiet, charming soundtrack, but the introductory sequence here just looks really good as well. I don't see anything in any of the imagery that makes me think that this is not just doing a 100% perfect job. But again, I'm not familiar with every single game, so if you see something, let me know. But it is just such a charming game. Now, the 2D Rayman games on modern platforms are still my favorite Rayman of all time, but it's been some years since I replayed Rayman 2, and I'm definitely going to take a look at it once this core matures a little bit more and I get the text, because I actually don't remember what the hell happens in this game whatsoever, so you can tell me down below. Now, everyone's been requesting WCW wrestling games on the core, and it finally works. You can finally get a match in, and now we know that that is Rowdy Roddy Pipe right there. The first time I showed it to you, I couldn't really tell because the graphics were so corrupt. But if you remember, the Macho Man has a signature catchphrase, and no, it's not snap into a Slim Jim, it's something completely different, and we're going to find out whether or not the core can get that correct. So go ahead and listen just for 5 seconds, then we'll decide together after you hear it. That's right, everyone, you heard the Macho Man say "oh yeah" and you could understand it, which means this core is done, it's 100% perfect, and it beats original hardware. Why? Just because I heard Macho Man Randy Savage say "oh yeah"? 100% so. But honestly, all jokes aside, this is just such a fun game. The wrestling games on the Nintendo 64 were some of the best ever made, and they are very old right now. We're talking about games that came out in the mid to late 90s, and they're still some of the best wrestling games you can play. But you'll see here that Macho Man spent a little bit too much time out of the ring and he got disqualified, and as we move on to the next arena, the game just does hard freeze. But let's snap right into the next game example on the list, and that is Tower and Shaft. And that's right, folks, that's 2 Macho Man Randy Savage jokes. I think we might go for 3 in the video. Tower and Shaft is not a Nintendo 64 game, it's an Alex 64 game. That is arcade hardware that uses the base Nintendo 64, but just changes up the cartridge shape and puts a JAMA edge on the side of it. And honestly, there's only 2 games right now that work for Alex 64, but Tower and Shaft is my favorite. I have an arcade board in the closet for it, so I'm so happy to see this playing. That means I don't have to drag that thing out next time I want to play it. This is basically like the STV for Sega up against the Saturn versus the Nintendo 64 and the Alex 64. And it's so much fun to see these games working because no one's really quite sure whether or not they would. But honestly, the base hardware for the Alex 64 is identical to the Nintendo 64, so I'm really not surprised to see this here. The game is so simple. You hold down one button until your power meter gets to the top or wherever you want to jump, and you need to ascend this shaft. But if you fall down and you go off the screen, you take a death. Super simple, super fun, and it 100% just works. Now moving on to Star Soldier, if you take a look at the bump intro screen here, you're going to say it says SATA as well as Alex 64, so you can tell this is arcade hardware, also because you coin up in the beginning. Now I've shown you the Nintendo 64 version of this, the one that released on a retail cartridge, but the arcade version does have slight differences as well, so it's going to be so much fun to get both versions of this game on the core. It's a fun shmup on a system that barely had any shmups whatsoever, and it also has a spectacular soundtrack, which I'll let you listen to in just a moment. But I'm so happy to see the Alex 64 ROMs are loading, and I can't wait to see what other games might come alive in the next core. But I told you, awesome soundtrack. Go ahead and listen, come back, because I still got like 4 games to show.
To save you from your foolish mistakes.
Great soundtrack, great game. If you've never played it, definitely give it a go. Now onto games that aren't great in either the soundtrack or the gameplay department is Deadly Arts, also known as GASP in Japan. And weirdly enough, I just recently did a video on this because it's got a lot of connections to the 3DO M2, a console that never existed that I collect for. And if you want to know more about that, just check my playlist. It does some really interesting, funny things. The skybox in some stages ends up in the foreground. You can see this entire cityscape in the back, and all of the fighters are behind it. You can see them at the bottom and the top, and as you go into the replay, it is just a black screen. This has a very unique and strange visual glitch that I'm sure will get ironed out in future cores, but it is fun to look at. Now some stages you're not going to see that whatsoever. You will see that some of the heads-up display, the life bars and such, are not prioritized correctly, but you can still see the characters. Now the Nintendo 64 didn't have a ton of 3D 3D fighting games, and honestly, Deadly Arts is not one of the best, but it is a fun and interesting game to look at from a technical perspective to see how it's running on the core, see what's working and see what's not working, because at least here we do have the characters in the foreground, and that's because there's polygons behind them or no real textures on the skybox. It seems like only when the skybox or background is a sprite does it end up coming above, but again, the replay just completely missing. But it's just one of those things. Seeing what doesn't work is as much fun, if not more so, than what does work. Now there's another fighting game that's much better that currently does work on the core, and we should be happy to have that. It is going to be Super Robot Spirits. Now this is a game that I never hear anyone mention, but I do have an upcoming episode for the Steam Deck series where I talk about the best Nintendo 64 games to play that you probably never heard of, and this game shows up on it. It is a 3D fighting game that takes place more in a 2D or a 2.5D perspective, and it's one of those things. It doesn't have a popular franchise behind it. This is not Street Fighter, this is not anything from SNK, but the fighting mechanics are sound, the speed is good, and it is just a lot of fun. And that's the great thing about a MiSTer core like this. You're not just going to be playing Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time on it, you're going to be playing a lot of different games that you've probably never heard of before. You're going to see in a list of games that are obscure, and you're just going to load it up onto your MiSTer and play it. You may end up finding one of your new favorite games, because while this is not the best fighting game ever, it's got charm and character to spare, and I love that about it. And I also love that you can both go up into the sky as well as have a ground-based fight. It's not something you're used to seeing in a fighting game outside of like Astra Superstars. It was not a common mechanic, but it just 100% works here in this game, and again, it just seems to be working perfectly. Now you might see some slowdown here or there. I do have an original cartridge for this game, and that has slowdown as well. I'm not sure if it's in the same spot. I would have to compare original hardware and original cartridges to the MiSTer core, and it doesn't seem like the core is ready to have it compared to original hardware yet because we know it is not done. But the controls work. I've tested this on my own MiSTer. It has just been an absolute fun time, and the great part is it's a two-player game as well, so once you have friends over and you want to play a deep cut fighting game on MiSTer and you feel like some Nintendo 64, Super Robot Spirits has you covered. It's just one of those things. If you've ever heard of this game before, leave me a comment down below. I would be curious because I'm going to feel like most people are going to say they have never heard of this one, but I always love introducing people to new games. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, you at least still get to have a new experience. Now speaking of games that everyone seems to know for all the right and wrong reasons, Quest 64 has graphical improvements. Now I'll tell you right now, this is not the cream of the crop for Nintendo 64, and if you're not familiar with your Macho Man lore, that is the third Macho Man reference in this video, and that, folks, is a Macho Man hat trick. All Macho Man jokes aside, Brian here tries to walk into the ocean to end his quest, probably one of the smarter things he will do in this storyline. Unfortunately, it's not possible to walk out there, but this has become the meme game for the Discord. Everyone picks a game just to kind of joke about to see when it will run, and Quest 64 has been it. Now here's the thing, I said earlier in a video, it's not a bad game, it's not a great game, it just kind of lacks a little bit of inspiration, but there's a ton of fun to be had, and graphically it does have a very unique, colorful, and charming look. Quest 64's only sin is not being a Final Fantasy game or not being any of the amazing RPGs we got on the Sega Saturn, and that's the thing, the Nintendo 64 doesn't have the biggest library, so some genres are just not going to be as well represented. Things like shmups, RPGs, you're not going to have as many of them on the Nintendo 64, so I could see a lot of fans of this game back in the day. If you only had one console and you liked RPGs coming from the Super Nintendo, you probably 100% played Quest 64 because you didn't really have a lot of other options, but I am curious if you played this game back in the day or if you just know it from the video, so tell me down below as well. But it is one of those things. It works, it's fun, it looks great, it sounds great, and I can't wait to see people actually finish this and tell me what they think about the game. Now moving on to another 3D platform, it's going to be Donald Duck. Now this game is actually relatively fun and good. It basically seems like it's just trying to be Crash Bandicoot the entire time, but it does an effective job of being a really good 3D platformer that uses that linear level structure like a Crash Bandicoot versus something like Super Mario 64 being completely open world. It also has a decent soundtrack as well that sounds great on the current MiSTer core, so go ahead and listen for just a second, but come back because I got a couple of viewer requests to show you before we close out the video. It may not be the best soundtrack ever put to a Nintendo 64 game, but it does work for an action platformer involving a duck. But if you've never played this game before, definitely check it out. It is not as good as Crash Bandicoot, but it does have that kind of vibe that it's going for, and it does work on the core. Not exactly sure why he's collecting teddy bears. I don't know if that's canon in the Donald Duck franchise, so if you do know anything about that, let me know, because I haven't watched anything Donald Duck in probably 18 forevers. But if you want another platformer that's not one of the common ones currently available, like Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie, you want to hit a little bit of a deeper cut, this game is just going to work for you. And it's one of those things, I've never actually played this game back in the day. I know it exists, I played it maybe once or twice because I ended up with it in my collection somehow, but I think I'm going to actually get a little bit further in now that it works on MiSTer. Now, a couple of viewer requests before we close the videos out. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly or not, but Aiden Chronicles was one that a bunch of different people asked about, and I can say at least on the introductory sequence side here, it does 100% work. Everything looks relatively good, but this is a game that I have 100% never played and never thought about up until it got to testing this core. But you'll see the graphics look good, the texture filtering is there, all of it is just intact. And you can see as we get into the game, we're going to open up a chest right at the beginning that's going to give you 3 healing potions. Don't know why they just don't start that with you in the inventory. It's a weird thing to get in game and have something that open up about a foot away. But it is working, it is controlling until you come around the corner here, and it's just unfortunately going to have a hard crash. So if you really want to see more of this game in the future, leave me a comment down below and tell me. And some people asked about Hexen as well. It is a really fun game on the Nintendo 64, but the Sega Saturn version is definitely my preferred version. You can get into the menu, you can get into the game, but just like when I showed you Quake in previous videos, you're going to see your character sprites, but nothing else whatsoever. You can see the mace here, you can swing it around, but there's nothing in the game, there's no enemy sprites, it is just you in a black void swinging into the ether, which honestly isn't the worst thing in the world, it's better than it not working whatsoever. But that is the current situation with this core, unless Robert updated it 4 hours before I run a video. He likes to do that sometimes. Honestly, I don't think he thinks about it. It is just one of those funny things. But I will keep updating these videos as long as you guys keep watching them. But it is just so impressive to see how much progress has been made on this core. 3 weeks ago, basically 2 games worked and you saw nothing. 3 weeks later, like 70% of the library is playable. Short of that, hope you guys had a great Labor Day. I'll see you tomorrow morning for another video and probably 2 days for Nintendo 64. Bye-bye.